Hello, welcome to Gospel Powered. I'm Charlie, and today in this video, I'm going to be talking about, can a non-Christian know anything? This is the accusation that is foisted upon the presuppositionalists. They say that what we are saying is, if our system is correct, that atheists or non-Christians can't know anything at all. The fact that they do know something argues against that. Therefore, presuppositionalism is false. Now, that is an argument that is used, but the argument is fallacious. It is a straw man, and it knocks down something that presuppositionalism does not say. So let's answer the question. Do non-Christians, can they know anything? Is there anything they cannot know? Are presuppositionalists saying non-Christians cannot know anything? And the answer is, that's not what we're saying. The non-Christian can know things. However, as Van Til liked to say, atheists can count, but they cannot account for counting. So the atheist can count, but cannot account for counting. And so the atheist can know things, and they can even count things, and they can even look at things scientifically in the world, but they cannot give you a philosophical ground for why they're able to count, why they're able to do scientific things. In other words, their system itself dissolves into irrationality, even though they appear very rational. And they do things that are very logical. And why is that they can do those things? And it's such a disparity. In a presuppositional apologetic, what we do is we look at that worldview and see, does it provide the preconditions necessary for intelligibility? Can atheists provide a reason for their ability to count and be logical? In their system, no, they cannot. They cannot account for counting because they cannot get to the immaterial laws that allow them to count. And so their system fails, and they ought to be irrational. But they're not irrational for the most part, right? They're irrational in that although their system fails and the Christian system does not, they do not come to the Christian system. And in that way, they are acting irrationally. However, in the world, practically speaking, they are very rational in what they are doing, and the Bible accounts for that. Atheists or non-Christians know a lot. They just cannot provide a rational ground in their worldview for the knowledge that they have. And we see this clearly in Romans 1:18-23. So I'm going to take you to this passage, and we're going to work through it a little bit in answering this question. It says this, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven." Before we even get past here, let's look at what the "for" is there for. The "for" is there for because Paul just said, the gospel is the power of God into salvation, so I'm not going to be ashamed of it. So why is Paul saying he's not going to be ashamed of the gospel? Because the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Paul says, I'm not going to be ashamed of the gospel because the unbeliever suppresses the truth. In their ungodliness, in their unrighteousness, they suppress the truth. What truth are you talking about, Paul? Look at verse 19. For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. So the knowledge of God, as we're going to see in the material world, is immediately recognized. It is apprehended. It's almost like you would say an a priori knowledge. I know it intuitively that God is there. So what can be known about God is plain in them because God has shown it to them. God is showing them himself as the truth all the time. Yet they suppress that truth in unrighteousness. And here's where we see what they're doing in verse 20. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so that they are without excuse. Let me read that again. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. Now notice his invisible attributes. They are invisible. They are things that you don't immediately apprehend in the physical world, yet they are recognizable in the material world. And what are these invisible attributes? His eternal power and his divine nature. His power enabling him to create these things, and his nature recognized within these things. They have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So the physical things that we see point past themselves to the invisible attributes of God, to his eternal power and his divine nature. And so they're immediately recognizable in the physical world. Yet, for although they knew God in this way by recognizing his invisible attributes in the things of the world, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. So they refused, even though their mind was looking at the physical world and being lifted beyond the physical world to the invisible attributes of God, they did not allow that to let them honor God or thank him. They refused to honor God and thank him, although they were looking past the physical world, recognizing these invisible attributes. Their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. So this is describing the suppression of the truth. So they see in the physical world things that point beyond the physical world to an immaterial world. And in that immaterial world, these are the attributes of God, yet they don't go from those invisible attributes to thanking God and honoring God. What did they do? They claim to be wise, but in their claiming wisdom in seeing these invisible attributes, they actually become fools because they don't thank God and they don't honor him. What do? They exchange the glory of the immortal God. They exchange the glory of God that they see in these immaterial things from the physical world. They exchange the glory of God for images resembling mortal man, birds, animals, and creeping things. So they exchange this glory of God that ought to be recognized from the invisible attributes, this glory of God. They refuse to honor God and thank him, and they start attributing those invisible attributes to things that man can come up with, or animals, or creeping things, or the things of the world. So what does that passage mean? It means basically this, and I'll put it in the language of presuppositional apologetics. The things of the world, the physical things of the world, point past themselves. In other words, we recognize in the material world examples of math laws. We see examples of logical laws. We see examples of scientific laws. And all of those examples point past the material world to an immaterial world. And that immaterial world, where those laws are held, are where the invisible attributes of God are recognizable. And so the material world, when it points to the laws of math, when it points to the laws of logic, when it points to the laws of science, it is pointing to the invisible attributes of God. But here's where humanity takes those laws and attributes them to anything else other than the true God, other than the God revealing himself in the Bible. They will reveal it to the philosophical God. They'll attribute it to any other system, any other worldview besides the revealed God of the Bible. So hear what I am saying. Man, in and of themselves, can look at the world and recognize laws of math, laws of logic, laws of science, and even apply those laws within the physical world. That is something that the Bible is saying the unbeliever can do and does do all of the time, while suppressing the fact that the invisible attributes of God, these laws of math, laws of logic, laws of science, point to the God who attributes are described in them. In other words, the Trinitarian God, with his internal consistency described in his internal Trinity, grounds the laws that we see. All of those things are attributes reflecting this God, and yet humanity takes all of the laws that they want and dismisses the God who grounds them. This is what presuppositional apologetics is saying all the time. And so non-Christians can know a lot. They can know these laws. They can apply these laws to the physical world. What they refuse to do is ground those laws in the attributes of the God revealed in the Bible. And that's exactly what the Bible is saying. They can use rational laws, but they cannot ground them. And so the Van Til's statement, the atheist can count but cannot account for counting, establishes that they can know a lot, but they do not have a philosophical system that allows them to establish the ground for what they know, because they suppress the truth of the God of the Bible. Hopefully that answers your question. Have a great day.